There was an idea.
To bring together a group of remarkable people.
To see if we could become something more.
So when they needed us, we could fight the battles
that they never could.
Movie franchises are now a staple of the film industry. Blockbusters and sequels are scheduled well in advance, spawning storylines lasting 3 or 4 films with characters to follow through several adventures. Some are self-contained, like Indiana Jones, while others are narratively linked, such as Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, and the DC Universe. There are some great franchises, like those I've just mentioned, and there are some not so great ones.
Don't eat cars.
Transformers.
Don't eat cars.
But with the release and success of Infinity War, this student believes the MCU has cemented its place as the best film franchise to have ever graced our screens. Most people forget that Marvel actually declared for bankruptcy in 1996. I would trace its path from bankruptcy to success based on the leadership of a number of people. First of all, Marvel was saved from bankruptcy by Ike Perlmutter and Avi Arad. They were able to expand Marvel from comics to toys to television shows and ultimately to movies. Avi Arad spearheaded Marvel's partnership with various studios for hit film franchises, starting with Sony's Spider-Man and Fox's X-Men. This culminated in Marvel Studios, which currently generates most of the profits for Marvel. Secondly, Kevin Feige was able to lead Marvel Studios to produce the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or what we now know as the MCU, which is currently the biggest movie franchise of all time in only 11 years. Subjective opinions aside, Marvel has succeeded so well since 2008's Iron Man and beyond for a number of different reasons. Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige was the brain behind creating a multi-character cinematic universe that was in tune with what Stan Lee and Jack Kirby did with the comics in the 1960s, and what others did beyond that. At the time, Marvel owned the rights to all of the Avenger characters, while studios like Fox owned X-Men and Sony owned Spider-Man. So Feige spearheaded the concept of the MCU, where they would introduce the Avengers characters in their own respective films and then have them merge into an epic Avengers franchise. While other superheroes from the likes of DC, whose rights are owned by Warner Brothers, we only got films from Batman and Superman for the most part, beyond some other lackluster offerings like Green Lantern, but others so promising like Wonder Woman and maybe even Aquaman. Here they had characters that weren't as popular as a Batman or Superman. Iron Man wasn't widely known outside of the comic fans. Same for Thor, the Black Widow, Nick Fury, and even Captain America. Sure, Captain America was widely known, however the mass audience outside of the comic fan realm wasn't as interested. Hulk was the exception. Much of the world knew that character from the TV series and slightly because of the 2 feature films, with different lead actors. Point being, none were as popular as those 2 DC giants that were Batman and Superman. But Feige and company rolled the dice. They introduced the key characters individually first, Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, and they built within each film to the Avengers. Patience was a virtue, and this cinematic universe gave filmgoers the thrill of anticipation of the eventual team-up. It also meant that all of these individual films were part of one story. Thor was connected to Captain America was connected to Iron Man. This was the same universe, and we all knew that everything and everyone would come together. Nick Fury was the bridge between all these films, so signing Samuel L. Jackson to such an expansive deal was an amazing move on Marvel's part. Marvel shied away from obvious choices. Imagine what Iron Man would have been like had Tom Cruise, who was attached for years, starred. I'm a Cruise fan myself, however. Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal was masterful, and none of us could imagine another actor in that role. Marvel took a huge gamble on him, because this was the actor that was the cautionary tale. He had been in and out of jail and rehab just a few years prior, and we had never starred in a film with such weight and scope. Then came the casting of Thor, Captain America, Hulk, the Black Widow, etc. Everything just fell into place. The Lord of the Rings, Indiana Jones, and the Dark Knight trilogy all have coherent, focused styles and tones which flow into one another. This is thanks to the same director, Peter Jackson, Steven Spielberg, and Christopher Nolan, respectively, helming all the films in the franchise. Other franchises, however, like Star Wars universe and the Harry Potter films, lack that sense of unity due to several different directors being utilized. This makes for tones and styles that clash with one another and almost seem like different movies entirely. The first two Harry Potters, the third, the fourth, and the fifth through eighth also vary greatly in style. Likewise, each Star Wars movie seems to undertake a differing tone from its predecessor. Remarkably, the MCU manages to utilize many different filmmakers and their respective styles, while remaining coherent and retaining that sense of flowing unity thanks to Kevin Feige's unyielding. No Michael Bays in this universe, no Paul Andersons, no Roland Emmerichs. Instead, Marvel partners with more artsy or lesser-known directors like Kenneth Branagh for Thor, Joss Whedon for The Avengers, Jon Favreau for Iron Man's 1 and 2, etc. Sure, Captain America the First Avengers director Joe Johnston was more of a studio director, but look at who they got for its sequel. Anthony and Joe Russo, who? Yes, Whedon was known for Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and to a lesser degree, from a mass audience's perspective, Firefly and Serenity, but he wasn't a major director by any means. Marvel works with great writers and directors, not just studio A-listers or go-tos. Iron Man was a risk. Captain America, Thor, these weren't high-profile properties from a mass audience perspective, but Marvel didn't care. They namely, under the guidance of Kevin Feige, took the risk. Most other studios would have done The Avengers as the first film, and then branched off from there. Take Justice League, Star Wars, for example. And then what do? After The Avengers becomes a phenomenon, as well as the individual character film sequels, they go against the grain, choice-wise, and make Guardians of the Galaxy, a comic that wasn't even that big with the comic fans and certainly wasn't even on the radar with the mass audience outside of comic communities, and it becomes one of Marvel's greatest hits. Even from a business standpoint, despite the success with the Disney partnership, Marvel sits down with Sony and says, you can retain the rights to Spider-Man, but we want to invite him into our MCU where we can all benefit. No big legal battles, no strong-arming, just smart business approaches and decisions. Now we're going to get to see Spider-Man into the mix, hopefully for the future. Now we're going to see Spider-Man become a certain figure in the MCU. Brilliant move by Marvel and Sony. Marvel's partnership with Disney was masterful. Now they had the ultimate financial backing, as well as the merchandise juggernaut accompanied by a viable home for the MCU in Disney. Hawkeye appeared in Thor before the Avengers. Nick Fury was the character that brought all the Avengers together, thus appearing in each of their films. The Collector plays a key role in the Infinity Stones in several movies. Storylines are also woven into different films, with some movies showing a different side to key events. Spider-Man Homecoming shows more of the Civil War background and fallout, as well as throwing back to Avengers Assemble to establish Vulture's origin story. Red Skull is brought back in Infinity War, harping back to Captain America the First Avenger, and Doctor Strange sets up Thor Ragnarok in its end credit sequence. There are so many of these examples which work to sew together a mighty 20 different films, each with varying storylines and purposes. Black Panther was the first film to feature a black lead superhero and a predominantly black supporting cast. This is groundbreaking, allowing kids to watch themselves on screen for the first time in a film everyone is seeing and everyone is talking about. Likewise, Captain Marvel will achieve the same effect next year with little girls around the globe. Yes, DC had Wonder Woman, which accomplished the same feat, but that's it. No other franchise had the same commitment Marvel seems to have with representing their entire audience. They could do more. Granted, with no major LGBT superhero in any Marvel film, but they're doing better than other studios. Dumbledore is gay, of course, but it remains to be seen if the Fantastic Beasts franchise will fulfill their artistic responsibility and direct explore the character's sexuality. The Lord of the Rings, Indiana Jones, and the Dark Knight trilogy all have coherent, focused styles and tones which flow into one another. This is thanks to the same director, Peter Jackson, Steven Spielberg, and Christopher Nolan respectively, helming all the films in the franchise. Other franchises, however, like the X-Men universe and the Harry Potter films, lack that sense of unity due to several different directors being utilized. This makes for tones and styles that clash with one another and almost seem like different movies entirely. The first two Harry Potters, the The fourth, and the fifth through eighth also vary greatly in style. Likewise, each X-Men film seems to undertake a differing tone from its predecessor. Remarkably, the MCU manages to utilize many different filmmakers and their respective styles. Guardians of the Galaxy, Avengers, Captain America the Winter Soldier all vary in tone, while remaining coherent and retaining the sense of following unity, thanks to Kevin Feige's unyielding vision. The best franchises make every single character, no matter how small or large, feel important. They ensure that they have their own distinct personality and will be remembered along with the story's main characters. The Lord of the Rings and Pirates of the Caribbean did these particularly well, with each orc, Uruk-hai, and pirate crew member remaining distinctive and unique. Who can forget Grishnak, the orc who chased Merry and Pippin in Two Towers, or Makis, the hammerhead shark pirate in Davy Jones' Crew? Okay, you may not remember the names, but you remember the characters. The MCU does this extremely well, but with one difference. All of their characters are actually important. The wealth of major characters is obviously a strength of the MCU, but all minor characters not only are distinctive and interesting themselves, they also play a part in the scene they're involved in. Some people find Doctor Strange too trippy for them, while others prefer the high school drama that comes with Spider-Man Homecoming. Some dislike the quipping adventures of the first two Avengers films, while others like the groovy nature of the Guardians franchise. Likewise, some may love the slick spy movie like Winter Soldier and Civil War, but loathe the Shakespearean grandeur of Thor. The retro video game feel of Thor Ragnarok differs completely from the ominous, foreboding tones of Infinity War 2. There are a slew of styles within the MCU studio genre. You may not like them all, but there is bound to be at least one that is right up your street. Marvel didn't invent the idea of film franchises, but they've done a lot to popularize cinematic universes. When the first Iron Man teased the Avengers, it felt like a pie-in-the-sky ambition. Following Marvel's rousing success, every studio has been scrambling to launch its own shared universe, and continue their own, including ones for the Ghostbusters, Scooby-Doo, the Transformers, other Hasbro toys, Universal Monsters, Star Wars, and Harry Potter. And no one bats an eye anymore when a studio snaps up release dates 5 years in advance for their flagship franchises. But so far, no one has quite managed to replicate Marvel's level of success. Although, the Disney era of Star Wars seems to be off to a promising start. If other studios are mimicking Marvel's shared universe plan, they should also learn from Marvel's deep investment in its characters, its painstaking attention to continuity and world building, and above all, its patience. After all, elaborate franchise plans don't amount to much unless audiences actually want to show up, and that's where Marvel is really kicking ass.